We're getting reaction throughout the programme from real experts and political insiders, and I'm delighted to be joined by the former Conservative MP and Education Secretary, Justine Greening. Justine, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm just recovering from a cold. Sometimes I sound a bit like Darth Vader right now, so apologies to anybody who gets a bit of a kind of in the background, which is incredibly attractive. So, Justine, what's your reaction to the autumn statement?
Well, it felt to me like Jeremy Hunt clearly achieved his objective of underlining some stability in public finances to the extent that, the markets had reacted incredibly badly to Liz Truss's budget as Prime Minister. We all saw what happened to that. So in a sense, he needed to represent a short-term financial plan. I think the big challenge for the Sunak government and the Conservatives is really how they get back on track with the underlying mandate they were elected to deliver, which is levelling up. And as you just said, Ayesha, there may well be a Treasury sort of mantra of pain today, half a hope tomorrow. Well, that's not going to win an election.
Yeah.
And I think the big gap that still needs to be filled is how to deliver on the levelling up agenda and how to give people a genuine hope that the country that comes out of these very difficult times is going to be a better, fairer one than the country that went into them before the COVID pandemic. And on that, everything turns, I believe. And I don't think you can just postpone it for the next couple of years. So I think this is a government that needs to set that out very clearly and put in place a credible plan. And dare I say, be cracking on with it before the election.
So you think this idea of sort of delaying some quite tough decisions, do you think the government should have just been upfront and said, right, this is what we're going to do now, rather than delaying it, which many people are arguing was a little bit of a political tactic as well?
Well, I could see the politics absolutely in it. I think what I'm saying is that I think this issue of levelling up is the long-term economic strategy for fixing public finances, because it's about making sure that more people have fairer opportunities. And if you can develop talent and connect it up with opportunities, that surely is the way in which you drive stronger tax revenues, but also reduce public spending effectively through having lives on track. And it's lives on track that will mean that we have an economy on track. So these things go hand in hand. And I think a number of city economists have pointed out that although almost in a cash flow perspective, the budget gives us more confidence that we're not going to see gilt rates go through the roof, actually that underlying long-term growth plan for success post-Brexit, which really is about how we make sure we develop our own labour market and connect that to opportunities. I think there still needs to be a lot more on that about how we deliver it. So, for example, what we could see right now is a reform to the apprenticeship levy. Employers are giving back £1 billion on average every year of that levy. They could be investing in upskilling and reskilling if the rules were relaxed a bit. And I think it's some immediate steps like that would have been smarter to take alongside putting in place a longer term plan.
And this is the anxiety that a lot of economists have. The CBI is about to start their annual conference on Monday. They've already issued some sort of concerning noises around the lack of growth. We spoke to a more right-wing economist earlier in the programme, and he made the case that he thought Jeremy Hunt had overcorrected because of the quasi-Kwarteng Liz Truss budget, which had completely spooked the markets. But he thinks the Chancellor might have swung the pendulum back too far. I mean, do you have some sympathy with that? Because it sounds to me from what you're saying that you would have liked to have seen a bit more money invested in things like skills and those things that help build, the tools for growth in the future.
I mean, I would say it was almost an impossible task for Jeremy Hunt. It's really easy to sort of say, oh, this was too much, that was too little. But I do think the real trick to this is getting that balance between what you need to do short term in order to make sure that gilt rates don't go through the roof and then our debt interest goes through the roof, what you need to do versus almost what you need to do for that longer term. So almost stabilising the markets was a necessity, a precondition for that growth plan. but having some ambition around that growth plan. I actually think for people in the city, when they're looking at what's holding back long-term growth for the UK, particularly in this post-Brexit version of the UK, they are looking at things like skills. So in the end, at some stage, a government is going to have to set out to the markets how we can have a more sustainable version of our economy. And that's the piece of this that I think the government still needs to set out in much, much more detail. And in a sense, it depends what your hypothesis is on what's holding back growth and what's driving inflation as well. And both things, is it demand side, is it supply side? I would say on inflation, clearly it's been supply side. It's been COVID disruption to supply chains. It's also increasingly recognised, and we were hearing this from the Bank of England governor. It's increasingly recognised that it is also labour market skills shortages and a tightness there that's driving wage inflation. So actually tackling the supply side constraints to growth are absolutely crucial. Now, Jeremy Hunt said he was going to keep in place capital spending, and clearly that's part of how, and R&D, that's part of how you drive improved productivity. But I think this human capital issue is one we are going to have to come back to and do much, much more and have more ambition on, I would say, as well.
And I presume immigration, some short-term immigration is also part of that mix in terms of the labour shortages.
Well, the government clearly is having its own debate about that. And I think, you know, when you look at that Brexit debate we had about taking back control, and we hear that small boats is one of Rishi Sunak's 3 priorities, that's reported in the Times today. Clearly it matters, but actually, in a sense, my view is it's no substitute for a long-term strategy on skills. And it's that you have to get right. If you can present the British people with a convincing, comprehensive plan on levelling up that includes skills, at that stage, you might be able to have a more measured discussion with people about what in the shorter term we might need to do on migration.
Well, that was a very measured discussion. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That's former Conservative MP and former Education Secretary Justine Greening.